Good morning, good morning, good morning. Just a blessing to be coming to you by way of Facebook and YouTube this morning. This is the day that the Lord has made, and I will rejoice and be glad in it. We want to get right on into our word. We have a word from God, and I want to share with you. It's simple, one that's very familiar to all of us, and it comes from St. Luke chapter 12, beginning at verse 15 through 21. And it reads as follows. And he said unto them, Take heed, beware of covetousness, for a man's life consists not in the abundance of things which he possesses. Okay? And he spake a parable unto them, saying, The ground of a certain rich man brought forth plenty. And he thought within himself, saying, What shall I do? Because I have no room where to bestow my fruit. And he said, This will I do. I will pull down my barn and build greater. And there will I bestow all of my fruit and my good. And I will say to my soul, Soul, thou hast much good laid up for many years. Take thine easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But I will say of my soul, but God said unto him, Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then who shall those things be which thou hast provided? So is he that layeth up treasures for himself, and is not rich towards God. I read for you from the 12th chapter of St. Luke, verses 15 through 21. I want to talk about the man that God called a fool. The man that God called a fool. Now don't go away and say Pastor Hayes on air calling people fools. But I want to talk about the man that God called a fool, and we want to get into that and discover why did God call this man a fool. Now, really one way of looking at that, the man who takes no thought of spiritual things, the one that doesn't make logical sense, the one that doesn't really think things through, sometimes is classified as fool. One that always talking stuff that doesn't make sense is, we label that sometimes as foolishness. But God gives us a parable here, and a parable is simply a short story, a simple story, used to illustrate morals or spiritual lessons that was told in the gospel by Jesus Christ. It's a short story that shows some things. Man, most of the time we are covetous. That means we spend a lot of time, too much time, going through things that really doesn't matter. Things for ourselves that we reach out and grasp, and collecting everything, and every thought that we have is for ourselves. That's covetous. This man that we'll talk about in our parable, that God called a fool, we determined was a covetous person. He used the word I so many times. Notice what he says here in verse 16. Or rather verse 17. And he thought within himself, saying, what shall I do? Because I have no room where to bestow my fruit. Now I and my punch the same way. It's to you. I and my mean the same thing. So this man used the term I and my so loosely. I mean, every other word, it was I and mine. He had no thought of God or what God has done for him. It was, he said, the ground had brought forth a plenty. This young man was rich. But notice, he did not include God in his blessings. People of God, it is foolishness when we do not recognize the blessings of God. When we refuse to honor God or to simply say thank you. If you look at your president on every hand, there's not a speech, or there's not a time that he don't come on there that he says, appreciate me, thank me for doing my job. Well, Trump wants you to thank him. Don't you think the Almighty God that made everything, heaven and earth and all that's in, and sustains us, don't you think he's worthy of some appreciation, some gratitude, or just saying thank you? I thought you would agree with that. Listen, God called this man a fool. He called him a fool because he only considered himself. Notice the emphasis on the word I. In this passage, this man had a base called perpendicular, straight up and down. What shall I do because I have no room to restore my good? And he was holding a conversation with himself. It's all right maybe to ask yourself a question, but I think it becomes seriously dangerous when you begin to answer the question, because the conversation is between you, yourself, and alone. And he said, this will I do. I will pull down my barn and build greater. And there will I bestow all my fruit. And I will say to my soul, soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. How many of us, that's all we think about? Eating, drinking, and having a good time. Well. And we live this life here as though it's a long party. And it's okay to enjoy yourself. But to take no thought of the Creator, to not think about the blessings and take time to be thankful enough to say thank you, I think that's a grave injustice to God Almighty. So this man was proud, he was conceited. Then in the 20th verse, God called this man a fool. And he said to him, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Tell me now who gonna use those things that you have spent a lifetime providing for yourself. Tell me who gonna use those things. You got to lay down and die. You got to leave here, and you've gathered up many things. Tell me who. You lived your life like you, Mr. King, you ruled, you super rules, you have everything in control. Now your time is expired. Who gonna use those things that you spend all your time laying up? So many words saying that life and death is in your hand. He took and laid those things up and began to talk to himself, said, eat, drink, and be merry. But that same night that he had made his decision, God came in and messed up his plan. He told him this night, not tomorrow or the next day, but this night, thy soul shall be required of thee. So he that had laid up treasures for himself and is rich towards God. How many of us are guilty? In this pandemic that we're going through, in which many of us have never experienced. We read a little history about it, but some things, but if you let your mind settle and let God use your mind, you'll discover that in this dark hour, in this uncertain hour, when people are dying by the thousand every day, and if you look and you see it's God that are blessing us in the midst of all of this epidemic that's going on. And listen, I, like anyone else, would like to live a long life for jeopardy. I would like to stay here, but it was appointed man to die, and after death and the judgment. One of these days, we have to go see our Maker.
That's right.
I'm not afraid of this coronavirus disease, but I know who holds the future. Listen, if you look at Daniel chapter 3 and began to look at these verses 16 through 18, it talks about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Well, these three men that trusted in God in spite of. Now, if you know the story, Nebuchadnezzar had made a graven image and set it up, and he told them, when you hear the music, fall down and worship the golden image that I set up, and praise my God. And whoever will not adhere to my command shall be in the same hour thrown into the fiery furnace. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego depended on God. They believed in God. And so it was brought to the king's attention that there were some men that wouldn't obey the rule. King brought in these three Hebrew boys. And when they came in, King Nebuchadnezzar thought, these are some boys that I kind of care. I'm going to give them another chance. And he says to them, listen, fellas, you did not obey my command, but this is what I'm willing to do. I will give you another chance. If when you hear the music, if you fall down and worship the image and worship my God, I'll forgive all. I want you to know here what they had to say in respect to them. He said, the king had said, who is able to deliver you out of my hand? The boy said, our God in whom we serve, he's able. And if he choose not to, I will not worship your God nor the image. So this is what I'm saying. God is able to deliver you from this coronavirus. He's able to deliver us out of this pandemic. But if he chooses not to, he's still able. Now listen, we can't lose with what we use. Listen, when God says, if he decides to take me through this pandemic, if he decides to bring me home, I'm still on good ground.
Yes.
So I'll step out of a world of pain and suffering into a world of fruit and honey and joy and peace. But back to God called him a fool because he did not care. He would not stand up. Isn't that right? Listen, if you will. Some people that are rich are most highly successful. They're good in business. Men that are good in business and highly successful in worldly things sometimes are the most bankrupt in spiritual things. Here's a man who was successful, a successful farmer, wise in his planting, wise in his harvest, wise in the marketing.
Yes.
It brought forth great wealth. This man, years of harvest was more abundantly this year. He had been careful planning concerning care of the production and decided to pull down those small barns and erect greater barns. And he said instead of him sharing with his brothers and sisters, he said, I'm going to pull down these smaller barns and make greater barns. But the Christian thing to do would have been, it's all right to fill his barns up, but all of the surplus looked like he would have thought about his brother and sister who did not have. That was not in his mind. Isn't that right? This man, God called him a fool. He was wise in worldly things, but he was bankrupt when it comes to spiritual things. Why did God call this man a fool? Was it because he was rich? I think not. God has always had great men of God that was rich. Job 1:1-3 talks about the richness of Job. It talked about Job's sustenance was 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 5,000 yokes of asses, 5,000 yokes of she-asses, and a very great household. This man was the greatest in all the East. So God didn't call him a fool because he was rich. Was it because he operated an unlawful business? Well, let's see what he was not. He was not a Mississippi rum runner. He was a lawful businessman, a farmer who depended on God for climate and good crop. Isn't that right? Well, our God called this man in this parable a fool. Notice what kind of man he was. Apparently, all outward appearance indicated that he was a good man. He was a law-abiding citizen. He was a good neighbor. He was a fine family man. He was above suspicion. He was living a good life in the suburbs in the best residential area of the city. He was not a wicked man or a member of a gang. He was not a crooked politician. He was not engaged in shady business. He did not have women on the side. Isn't that right?
That's right.
But this man God still called him a fool. And the reason God called him a fool, because the man that take no thought of tomorrow, the man that does not look and figure out what he's going to do for future, the man that don't spend no time with God, this man is a man God called a fool. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Listen at this little appetite, this little poem that Vernon McGee left on record. He says, here lies John Rocket in his little wooden jockey. He kept neither horses nor mules. He lived like a hog, and he died like a dog. And he left all of his money to food. Our Lord called this man in this parable a fool, but notice what kind of man he was implied. All outward appearance. Isn't that right? Huh? Yes. While this man gave all of his thoughts to himself, all that was in his vocabulary was I and mine and what he was going to do for himself. He never considered his brothers and his sisters. He never considered his brother. He never wanted to share. Here's another reading from McGee. He says, I had a little tea party this afternoon at 3. It was very small, 3 guests in all, just I, myself, and me. Myself ate the sandwiches while I drank up the tea. 'Twas also I ate the pie and passed the cake to me. Listen, my brothers and sisters, huh? We ought to have more consideration. If all we have, if all we can think about having a good time today on this side, eating, drinking, and being merry, eating, drinking, and being merry,
yes,
that's all we can think about. That's a sad condition. Somebody has said, oh, let us have a good time, let us eat and drink, but we lay down and die tomorrow. No, we will be caught up. Those that remain will be caught up when he come back to live with us.
yes,
When he come back to take us to live with him, we'll be caught up in the midair. Is that right?
yes.
Jesus talks about this parable of the fool. And don't forget, I stopped by here on this 10th day of April, and I told you, do not let God call you a fool. And it was all because he had no thought. He had no concern. He had no love for God. Isn't that right? I think that if we would apply John 3 and 16 says unto us, for God so loved the world that he gave his son, and his son gave his life, that you and I can live again. Yes, we can live even after we've died. One of these old days, when time is expiring on this side, yes, we may lay down on this side of the river because of car wrecks, epidemics, coronavirus, high blood pressure, cancer, and all of these diseases. But if you lay down over here with a disease, if you lay down on this side, yes, with disfigured body, limbs missing, if you lay down over here, the God that I serve, the one that hung between the heaven and the earth, the one that said, Father, in the thine hands I commend my spirit. right, one of these days, the same one that got up out of the grave, and the record said, when he got up the other day, all of the saints that occupied graves, they got up out of the grave and went walking. You talking about a stroll. They strolled into Jerusalem, and all of the people saw the dead saints that once was in the grave. Isn't that right? And as they got up out of the grave, one of these days we gonna get up. Yes, we arise with healing in our wings. Ain't God all right? Yes. Don't let God call you a fool. In all you do, remember God. He's the one to save you when the world is on fire. God bless your heart. Pastor Hayes saying, Godspeed. See you next week this same time, right here. God bless you. God pray. Amen.